Taoiseach, at the weekend you said when it comes to housing policy that your highest priority was home ownership. I think lots of people, especially people in my generation, find that literally impossible to believe. Fine Gael in government has literally done the opposite to increasing home ownership. Not that anyone needed any more evidence of this, we have more of it today from the census. The rate of home ownership fell from nearly 70% in 2016 to just 66% last year. And Taoiseach, we know this inability to buy a home is not spread evenly amongst the population. It is disproportionately people in their 20s, 30s and their 40s who are locked out of home ownership. Did you know, Taoiseach, that in 2006, that's just the year before you were elected to the Dáil, the average age of a first-time buyer in Ireland was 29. Last year, the average age of young people who finally managed to move out of their parents' home was 28. So we've gone from young people aspiring to home ownership to people finding it increasingly difficult to even move out of their childhood bedrooms at the same age. And yet you still claim with a straight face that Fine Gael is somehow the party of home ownership. I don't honestly know who you think you're kidding, but I can tell you that people have had enough of that kind of spin. You've now been in office for 12 years. At what point do you think you take some responsibility for the fact that your approach isn't working? It's difficult to know when you've yet to even acknowledge the fact that your approach isn't working. Meanwhile, the share of 25 to 34-year-olds who own their own home more than halved between 2004 and 2019, plummeting from just 60% to 27%. The fact is, you can't blame anybody else for this miserable record. The best you could maybe do is blame your coalition partners, Fianna Fáil. But the saddest part is that it's not your government that's paying the price for this failure. There are tens of thousands of people all over the country who regularly wonder, what if? What if they'd been able to buy a modest home at the same age as their parents were able to? What would their lives look like now? What kind of opportunities could they have availed of? Would relationships have lasted? Would they have children now? Would their mental health be better? Would they be able to save for their retirement? Taoiseach, I regularly speak to young people now whose anger has actually become weariness. They've witnessed so much failure and been so angry for so long that they are now weary and exhausted. They're tired of broken promises and the ridiculous spin that your government can fix this housing disaster. They now wonder what will become of them when they're older and can't afford to pay rent on their pensions. All the while, you're trying to frame your party as the party of home ownership.
Time is up, Deputy.
Taoiseach, my questions are, do you accept that you've presided over continuing collapse in home ownership rates? And are you actually going to continue to try and frame Fine Gael as the party of home ownership when all of the evidence is the opposite? Do you think people fall for that spin?
Sure.
Thanks, Deputy. I'm somebody who believes in home ownership. I believe there is no form of housing security better than home ownership. Not only does it give you the security of owning your own home, it means you don't have to pay rent when you retire. It gives you financial freedom as well. The option, for example, of borrowing against the value of the home to return to education gives you so many options that you just don't have if you don't own your own home. And yes, I acknowledge that home ownership has fallen in the period of the census between 2016 and 2022. But it's 66%. It's still the case that 2/3 of people in Ireland own their own home. I want that to go back up again. I'd like to see it going back up towards 70%. And I know, of course, that there is a generational divide, that many people in their 20s and 30s, even 40s, are unable to purchase their own home at the moment. What we have seen the last couple of months, and bear in mind the census was done last summer, what we have seen the last couple of months is a very major uptick in the number of people buying their first home. We see in around 400, 500 people every week now buying their first home. And bear in mind that's probably an underestimate because couples are counted as one when it comes to those figures. And they're from the CSO, they're also from the Banking and Payments Federation of Ireland. So last 6 months, a very significant uptick in the number of people buying their first home, the highest that we've seen since the Celtic Tiger period. And that does give me hope and does indicate that the policies that have been introduced by this government are starting to work. It is about increased supply. It's also about the Help to Buy scheme, which helps people get their deposit. It's also about First Home, which helps people to bridge the gap between the mortgage they can get and the house that they want to buy. And it's also about vacancy and the vacant property grants that we're giving people to breathe life into old buildings and turn them back into new homes. The Social Democrats have a motion down at the moment claiming to be the party of home ownership. You're against all of those things. You regularly object to new housing. You're against the Help to Buy. You're against First Home. So how can you say that you're the party of home ownership?
Holly Cairns.
It was Fine Gael who said they were the party of home ownership. Excuse me?
Wait, no, sorry, please. It's Deputy Cairns.
The reality is, Taoiseach, and everybody knows it, that the facts are clear. Rents have never been higher. House prices have never been higher. Homelessness has never been higher. The number of young adults living at home in their parents' bedroom has never been higher. And rates of home ownership have fallen, especially amongst the younger population. A further collapse in home ownership was not inevitable, nor was it an accident. It's you continuing to pursue exactly the same policies over and over again. And I'm glad you mentioned the Social Democrats motion tomorrow, because in that we have suggestions. And I regularly hear you come into this House and say, why don't you come forward with suggestions? Part of it is to redirect funds from the department to buyers to bring down the price of housing for home ownership rather than into the pockets of developers. That strategy has been failing for years. So, Taoiseach, my question now is, we have suggested alternatives. We're bringing a motion to the Dáil tomorrow. Will you consider any of them, given that you've acknowledged that all of the facts I raised are true? Will you consider any of the proposals in the Social Democrats' motion tomorrow?
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. We will consider them, and you'll see our response to it when the debate occurs. But Deputy, you can list statistics, and that's fair enough. But there are other statistics that I can mention as well. House prices have been falling for several months now. In Dublin, they've fallen for nearly 6 months in a row. They have peaked, and they are falling. And also, the number of people buying their first home, nearly 400 a week now, the highest since the Celtic Tiger. You can't deny that reality. It's a fact. So what are we doing? We've reduced development levies to increase supply. We've put in place the Help to Buy, which has helped tens of thousands of people raise a deposit for their first home. And we have First Home now in place, bridging the gap between the mortgage you can get from the banks and the cost of the home you want to buy. And we have the local authority home loans. By and large, your party doesn't support those policies. You would take them away, and that would make it harder for people to buy their first home.